You've arrived at CozySideAudio, where dreams begin with a story. Whether you're studying, journaling, or just chilling, this one's for you. If you vibe with this kind of content, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe for more.
CozySideAudio presents The School Bus Jokester. Chapter 1, First Day on the Job. Ray Carter had never been good at silence. Not the polite kind, like a doctor's office waiting room where everyone pretended to read old magazines. Not the solemn kind, like church pews or funeral homes. And especially not the suffocating kind, the silence of a school bus filled with teenagers who had all silently decided the new bus driver wasn't worth even looking at. The first day of the school year was supposed to be exciting. At least, that was what Ray told himself. As he eased the big yellow bus around the corner of Maple Street, the long body of it creaking and sighing like it hadn't been ready to be dragged out of summer either. The steering wheel felt wide and stiff in his hands, and the smell of vinyl seats and old diesel already clung to his work shirt. He was 42 years old, starting over again, and trying very hard not to think about how this wasn't exactly where he thought life would have landed him. He'd driven plenty of vehicles before pickups, moving vans, even the church shuttle when the old driver had bad knees. But this was different. Behind him was a swarm of teenagers. Seniors slouched with their earbuds in, juniors whispering in pairs, a few freshmen looking terrified like someone had just dropped them on another planet. Their silence wasn't reverent, it was judgmental, suspicious, as if every single one of them had decided in unison. This guy's not Mr. Reynolds. Who does he think he is? Mr. Reynolds, Ray knew, had retired after 30 years. Beloved, reliable. A man who let kids carve their names into the seats as long as they weren't fighting. The kind of driver who remembered birthdays and knew which stop belonged to whose grandma. Ray was stepping into the shoes of a legend, and he knew legends weren't replaced. They were only tolerated until people learned to stop comparing. So Ray did what he always did when he was nervous. He tried to be funny. "Well," he said, glancing at the long rearview mirror, where a dozen pairs of eyes might have been watching him if they weren't all carefully avoiding eye contact. "You kids are a quiet bunch. Quieter than my washing machine, and that thing hasn't worked properly since '98. No reaction." One kid coughed, another adjusted their backpack. The rest might as well have been statues. Ray cleared his throat. "You know, I used to think driving a school bus would be scary, but I realized it's just like driving a Twinkie with windows." He smiled at his own joke, then realized he was the only one smiling. He tapped the steering wheel nervously. "No, not a Twinkie crowd, huh?" Someone in the back muttered, "What's a Twinkie?" The bus erupted into a ripple of laughter, not at the joke, but at the comment. Ray chuckled with them, even though it wasn't exactly aimed at him. "What's a Twinkie? Oh boy, this generation's got some catching up to do." Still, a spark. A moment of noise that wasn't total dismissal. He decided to keep leaning in. "You know, back in my day, bus rides were like gladiator arenas. Middle schoolers fighting over the last Capri Sun pouch. Somebody always losing a shoe. Someone trying to open the emergency exit just to see if it worked." He made a show of raising his eyebrows in the mirror. "Don't get any ideas back there. I like you all, but I'm not explaining to your parents why you decided to practice skydiving without a parachute." That got a few smiles. Not laughs, not yet, but smiles were the seedlings of laughter. He'd take it. Ray had prepared for this, though. The night before, he'd sat at his kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and written down bus jokes at the top in thick black marker. Below it, a bulleted list. These seats aren't uncomfortable. They're character building. The bus heater has two settings, sauna or Arctic expedition. Assigned seats, that's called wherever your legs collapse. Don't worry, if we break down, we'll just start a marching band. He hadn't been sure if teenagers cared about any of that, but he figured if he treated it like a comedy club, maybe the ride wouldn't feel so long for them and for him. As he turned onto the main road leading toward the high school, he tried another one. "So, quick poll. If this bus were an animal, what would it be? My money's on turtle. Big, slow, and every once in a while someone sticks their head out the window." One girl near the front, a sophomore, judging by her backpack still covered in middle school keychains, snorted before catching herself. She immediately looked out the window, cheeks pink. Ray caught the sound, though. That tiny snort was a victory. He grinned, not pushing his luck, just letting the bus roll forward. Iromashitor. By the time they pulled into the school parking lot, the silence had cracked just slightly. A whisper here, a stifled laugh there. Nothing seismic, but enough for Ray to feel he hadn't completely bombed. As the kids gathered their bags and shuffled off, one boy muttered, "Twinkie bus," under his breath, and a few others chuckled. Ray pretended not to hear, but smiled to himself. Maybe he wasn't Mr. Reynolds, maybe he wasn't a legend yet, but maybe just maybe he could find his own way to make these rides matter. The afternoon run wasn't much different. The kids climbed on, tired from the first day of school. Weighed down by assignments and syllabi, Ray watched them slouch into their seats. He hated the way their shoulders sagged, like the world had already pressed too hard on them. He wanted to lift that weight, if only for 15 minutes. So he said, "You all look like you just ran a marathon. What happened? They make you learn today?" Criminal. I thought the first day was just for decorating notebooks. A few chuckles. Progress. Tell you what, he added as he shifted the bus into gear. We'll start a new tradition. Every morning you get one fresh joke. Every afternoon you get one old classic. That way, your brain's stretched both directions. Like yoga, but for your funny bone. The students groaned at the word funny bone, but a couple were grinning. Ray tapped the steering wheel. All right, let's test this system. Morning joke was Twinkie bus. Afternoon classic? Why did the scarecrow win an award? A chorus of groans rose. Half of them already knew. Half of them dreaded the punchline. Because he was outstanding in his field. Ray delivered it with over-the-top flair, hand raised like he'd just announced a Broadway finale. The groans turned into reluctant laughter. Real laughter this time, from at least 3 separate corners of the bus. One kid clapped sarcastically. Another booed, but with a grin that gave him away. Ray smiled wider than he had all day. That night, he wrote in his notebook again. On the first page under bus jokes, he scribbled, Day 1, Twinkie bus, mixed results. Day 1, PM, scarecrow joke, groans, laughs, success. And below that, he added, Goal, make bus rides something kids look forward to, not dread, even if it's just for the jokes. He closed the notebook, set it on the counter, and poured himself a cup of tea. The day had been long, awkward, nerve-wracking, but the snort from the sophomore, the sarcastic clap, the whispered Twinkie bus, those were little victories. Seeds planted. Tomorrow, he'd water them with another bad joke, and the day after, another, until the silence cracked all the way open and laughter became the soundtrack of his route. For now, though, he was just grateful to have made it through day 1. And, in his quiet kitchen, he let out a laugh of his own, because he realized something important. He'd just told his very first bus joke, and it hadn't killed him. If anything, it had given him a reason to look forward to tomorrow. Chapter 2. The Groan Zone. Ray Carter woke up on the second day of school feeling like a man preparing for battle. His armor, a fresh shirt that smelled faintly of detergent, his weapon, a notebook full of terrible jokes, his battlefield, bus hash 17, the aging yellow beast that rattled like a skeleton in the wind and smelled permanently of gym socks and mechanical grease. He wasn't nervous anymore, at least not exactly. Yesterday had been his trial by fire, his shaky debut in front of the toughest audience in the world, high schoolers at 7 in the morning. Today, he had a plan. He had material, and he had the tiniest shred of evidence that they might be warming to him. The sarcastic clap, the whispered Twinkie bus, the sophomore's involuntary snort. That was how all great comics started, right? One laugh at a time. By 6:55 a.m., Ray was sitting high in the driver's seat, hands resting on the big steering wheel like it was a ship's helm. He had parked at the first stop on his route, and the morning mist clung to the windows, making the bus feel like a submarine waiting to surface. The first student to climb aboard was a boy with shaggy hair and a skateboard tucked under his arm. He gave Ray a nod, not a word, and headed for the middle rows. Ray cleared his throat. Morning, you ready for the joke of the day? The boy paused halfway down the aisle, gave Ray a look that could only be described as, why are adults like this, and plopped into his seat. Ray grinned. I'll take that as a yes. All right, here it is. Why don't scientists trust atoms? The boy groaned, loud, long, the kind of groan that could have powered the bus if someone had attached it to a generator. Ray delivered the punchline anyway. Because they make up everything. Another groan. From the back this time, someone who hadn't even been listening at first. Ray counted that as progress. Stop by stop, the bus filled up. A pair of twins in varsity jackets. A girl who always read fantasy novels with glittery covers. Two freshmen whispering so loudly that their whispers weren't whispers at all. Ray greeted each of them with a smile and, when they ignored him, kept on talking anyway. Welcome aboard, folks. You're just in time for today's comedy club on wheels. No cover charge, but tips in the form of candy bars are accepted. Boo, one kid muttered. Ray chuckled. Harsh crowd. All right, here's another one. What do you call fake spaghetti? He paused dramatically. An impasta. The groans came in waves now. A few kids pressed their foreheads to the windows like they couldn't bear to make eye contact with the driver responsible for such crimes against humor. But, and this was the part that mattered, Ray noticed one junior, a lanky kid in headphones, shaking his head with a smile he was trying very hard to hide. Ray made a note in his brain. The groan zone has been achieved. When groans turn into grins, you're winning. By the time they reached the high school, the joke of the day had spread like wildfire. Not because it was funny, but because kids were competing to groan louder than the person next to them. Ray watched them pile out of the bus, shouting at each other. Hey, what do you call fake spaghetti? One kid yelled, imitating his delivery. An impasta, came the chorus from three others, followed by laughter that was half mockery, half genuine amusement. Ray leaned back in his seat, satisfied. They thought they were making fun of him, but he knew better. They were repeating his material. And repeating meant remembering. Remembering meant it stuck. The afternoon ride was even better. Kids climbed on and immediately asked, "What's the joke today?" Like customers checking a menu. Ray grinned. You sure you're ready for it? This one's dangerous. Might make you laugh so hard you forget your homework. Just say it, Mr. Carter. Ray paused for effect. All right. What do you call a fish with no eyes? The bus went silent. Anticipation hung in the air. Shh, Ray whispered, drawing out the sound. The bus exploded. Half of them laughed, half groaned so dramatically that Ray swore one kid almost fell out of his seat. A senior shouted, "That's terrible," while laughing so hard he couldn't breathe. Ray slapped the steering wheel. Terrible? Terribly good, maybe. The kids booed him, but their voices were bright. It wasn't silence anymore. It was noise. And noise was life. That night, at his kitchen table, Ray wrote in his notebook. Day 2. Adam joke, too smart for this crowd, try again later. Impasta joke, perfect groan fuel, use sparingly. Fish with no eyes, gold, saved by delivery. And below that, groans are not failure, groans engagement, groans mean they're listening. He leaned back in his chair, pen tapping the page, and smiled. Yesterday he had been trying to earn their laughter. Today he realized he didn't need all of them to laugh. He just needed them to react, to feel something other than boredom while riding this bus. It was going to be a long year, but maybe, if he kept working at it, he could turn this bus into something better than just transportation. Maybe he could turn it into a tradition. Chapter 3. A small crack in the ice. By the third week of school, Ray Alvarez had learned something about teenagers. They were experts at hiding. Behind hoodies, headphones, crossed arms, and deadpan stares, they built walls so thick they might as well have been made of brick. But every wall, Ray told himself, had a crack. You just had to find it. And today, he thought, as he turned the ignition of bus #17 and listened to the familiar wheeze of the engine, might be the day. The morning started like any other. He pulled up to the first stop, opened the folding doors with a hiss, and was greeted with the sight of Marcus, a tall junior who never said a word, skateboard in hand as always. "Morning, Marcus," Ray chirped. "You ready for today's wisdom?" Marcus gave his standard grunt and trudged down the aisle. Ray smiled. Grunt meant listening. Grunt was a foothold. He cleared his throat. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Marcus plopped into his seat, staring out the window. Because, Ray said, drawing it out, he was outstanding in his field. Silence. For a moment, Ray thought it had flopped. Then almost imperceptibly, Marcus's shoulders shook. Just once, a laugh he tried to bury. Ray's grin stretched ear to ear, crack found. Stop by stop, more students filed on. A girl with braids lugging a clarinet case, a pack of varsity soccer players, a quiet freshman whose backpack looked bigger than he was. Ray greeted each one like they were walking into a comedy club. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You've arrived just in time for the joke of the day. Groans rolled through the bus, automatic as breathing. But they weren't sharp groans anymore. They were ritual groans. Groans with a rhythm, almost like they were a part of the act. Ray leaned into it. Don't like that one? Fine, I've got backups. What do you call cheese that isn't yours? Half the bus shouted it before he could. Nacho cheese! Ray threw up his hands. Ah, you ruined the punchline. You're fired, all of you. And for the first time, laughter rippled through the rows, small, quiet, but unmistakable. In the afternoons, the cracks widened. A sophomore named Kayla lingered near the front seat instead of rushing to the back like everyone else. She had earbuds in, but one dangling free. Hey, Mr. Alvarez, she said casually, eyes on her phone. Got a new one today? Ray nearly stalled the bus in surprise. A request. He collected himself. Well, let's see. What do you call a can opener that doesn't work? Kayla shrugged. A can opener. She rolled her eyes so hard he thought they might get stuck. But she smirked to the kind of smirk that said, That's so dumb. But fine, I'll allow it. Another crack. The moment that sealed it came one rainy Thursday. The bus was stuffy with damp jackets and the smell of wet sneakers. Everyone looked half asleep, rain dripping from their hair. Even Ray felt the gloom settling in, like the weather had stolen everyone's spirit. He couldn't let that ride win. So, at a stoplight, he cupped his hands around his mouth and bellowed, Attention, passengers. This is your captain speaking. We are currently cruising at an altitude of 0 feet. In-flight entertainment will now begin. A few heads turned, mostly curious, partly annoyed. Ray forged ahead. Knock, knock. No answer. The light turned green. He drove on. Come on, he said, voice bright. Somebody, anybody, knock, knock. A beat of silence. Then, from the back, a tiny voice of freshman piped up. Who's there? Ray slapped the steering wheel. Victory. Lettuce. The bus murmured. Lettuce who? Came 3 different voices overlapping. Let us in. It's raining out here. For half a second, nothing. Then the dam broke. Kids groaned, shouted, threw their hands up, but they were smiling. Even Marcus the skateboarder laughed openly this time, head tipped back against the window. And just like that, the ice was no longer unbroken. That night, Ray sat at his kitchen table, notebook open, raindrops pattering against the window. He jotted it down carefully. Day 14. First crack in the ice. They're responding. They're not just hearing me, they're talking back. It's not my jokes, it's the fact I keep showing up with them. He tapped his pen, smiling to himself. It wasn't about being the funniest man alive, it was about being there, every morning, every afternoon, with something to break the monotony, a voice reminding them they weren't invisible, that even a ride on a damp, rattling school bus could hold a flicker of joy. And Ray decided he'd keep chipping away at that ice, one bad pun at a time, until the whole wall came down. Chapter 4. The First Connection. By October, Ray Alvarez had settled into a rhythm. Morning shifts meant coffee so strong it could wake the dead, a quick breakfast he barely tasted, and then the steady crawl through quiet neighborhoods as dawn painted the sky pink. Afternoons meant more chaos, more noise, and more jokes that landed somewhere between brilliance and complete disaster. And yet every day, without fail, kids boarded his bus with an expectation now. They rolled their eyes, sure. They groaned, definitely. But underneath it, Ray saw it. A flicker of anticipation. Like they knew, yeah, The bus driver's going to hit us with something, and we're going to pretend we hate it. And secretly, it'll make the ride better. It had become part of the ride. Their ride. But Ray still hadn't gotten what he was quietly waiting for. The moment when the joking gave way to something deeper. The moment when one of these kids, any of them, trusted him enough to actually talk. That moment came sooner than he expected. And now it was a gray Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the clouds hung low and everything looked like it had been washed in dishwater. The bus smelled of damp jackets and pencil shavings. Ray was halfway through telling a joke about cows when he noticed someone hovering near the front. Sophie. She was a sophomore, small for her age, always carrying a sketchbook with doodles scrawled across the covers. Usually she sat quietly in the third row, earphones in, a bubble no one seemed able to pop. But today, instead of drifting past him, she paused by the driver's seat, clutching her sketchbook tight. Ray blinked. "Hey there, Sophie. Uh-oh, you look serious. What'd I do this time? Forget to pay the bus toll?" She gave him a half smile, the kind that tugged at just one corner of her mouth. Then she flipped her sketchbook open and held it up. It was a cartoon. Of him. Ray, exaggerated with a giant goofy grin, holding a microphone while driving the bus. Above him, in a word bubble. Why did the chicken cross the road? To catch Ray's bus. Ray let out a laugh so sudden he startled himself. "No way. You drew this?" She nodded, cheeks pink. "This is incredible." He tapped the paper with one finger. "I mean, look at my hair. You nailed the bald spot perfectly. That's talent right there." Sophie actually laughed, a small, real laugh, before sliding into the seat across the aisle. From then on, Sophie became his first unofficial co-conspirator. She started handing him doodles every week, silly cartoons of his jokes, sketches of the bus as a flying spaceship, drawings of her classmates groaning dramatically in their seats. Ray displayed them proudly on the little bulletin board near his driver's seat, where other drivers taped safety reminders. Bus #17 had no safety flyers. Bus #17 had cartoons. And the kids noticed. "Wait, that's me," one of the soccer players shouted one afternoon, pointing at a doodle of himself, holding his head in agony at one of Ray's puns. Sophie smirked, but didn't deny it. Soon, the cartoons became part of the ritual, too. Ray would deliver the joke of the day, the kids would groan, and Sophie's pencil would already be scratching away, immortalizing the moment. One afternoon, as the bus rattled down Maple Street, Sophie lingered again after handing him a drawing. "You know," she said quietly, "the bus is kind of the best part of my day." Ray almost missed the stop sign ahead. He glanced at her, surprised. "Really? Out of all the hours, all the classes, all the friends, this is it?" She shrugged. "Yeah, school's hard, but here it's funny, even if it's dumb." Ray felt a lump rise in his throat. He swallowed it down, forcing a grin. "Dumb I can do. Dumb's my specialty." For the first time since he'd started, the jokes didn't feel like jokes anymore. They felt like threads, weaving something stronger than he'd expected. That night, at his kitchen table, he opened his notebook and wrote, "Day 27. First real connection. Sophie, sketchbook." They don't just groan because they have to. They're listening. Maybe I'm not just filling time. Maybe I'm giving them something to carry into the day. He sat back, staring at the words. Comedy had always been his way of connecting with people, but this was different. These weren't late-night crowds or strangers in a bar. These were kids who were still figuring themselves out, who maybe needed someone goofy, someone steady, someone who made the bus feel like more than just a ride. And if he could be that person, if he could make even one student feel lighter, then all the groans in the world were worth it. The next morning, as Sophie boarded with her sketchbook tucked under her arm, Ray gave her a wink. "Hey, Sophie, what do you call an artist who can't draw straight lines?" She rolled her eyes, already smiling. "What?" "A sketchy character." And for the first time, she laughed out loud before even reaching her seat. Chapter 5. Building a Ritual. By winter, bus #17 had become something different. It still rattled down the same cracked streets, still reeked faintly of gym bags and banana peels, still carried the same chorus of yawns in the morning and chatter in the afternoon. But somewhere along the way, the bus had transformed into something more than a metal box on wheels. It had become a stage, a clubhouse, a second home. And it had a ritual. It started with Sophie's cartoons taped near the driver's seat, a colorful, ever-growing gallery. Then came Marcus, the quiet skateboarder, who surprised everyone one frosty morning by answering Ray's knock-knock with a deadpan, interrupting cow. Ray paused, confused. Moo! Marcus shouted, cutting him off. The bus erupted in laughter. Ray slapped the steering wheel and grinned. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus has officially stolen my job. I expect my pink slip any day now. From then on, the kids didn't just wait for his jokes, they started adding their own. A rhythm emerged, as natural as breathing. Morning. Ray welcomed each student like they were walking into his comedy club. Welcome back, Kayla! Your seat's been warmed for you by the spirit of 1,000 groans. Mid-route, someone would throw a joke of his way, usually terrible, sometimes clever, always followed by a round of exaggerated boos. Arrival at school. Ray signed off with a classic. Don't do drugs, don't join gangs, and remember math teachers are just stand-up comedians who lost their sense of humor. Afternoons had their own pattern. He'd start with a one-liner, Sophie would sketch the moment, and someone in the back would shout a parody. It was messy, loud, and somehow perfect. Somewhere in February, the ritual grew into something more tangible. Kayla, the sophomore with earbuds always dangling, decided the bus needed themes. Joke Wednesdays, she announced one morning, plopping into the front seat. We bring jokes too. You're not the only funny guy, Mr. Alvarez. Ray raised an eyebrow. Is this a mutiny? On my bus? She smirked. Democracy. And just like that, Wednesdays became their day. Kids scoured the internet for the worst puns, the strangest riddles, the dumbest knock-knocks. By March, Joke Wednesdays had become a sacred tradition. Then came Question Fridays, started by a shy freshman named Daniel. It happened almost by accident. One Friday, he asked from the back, "Hey, Mr. A, if you could be any animal, what would you be?" Without missing a beat, Ray said, "A sloth. I already have the speed down, just need the tree." The bus howled, but after that, every Friday, a new question was lobbed forward like a paper airplane. What was your high school like? Did you ever get in trouble? What's your favorite food? Ray answered honestly, sprinkling humor wherever he could. But in between the laughs, something else was happening. They weren't just listening to a jokester. They were listening to him. And he, in turn, was listening back. One spring afternoon, as the bus wound past blooming dogwoods, Sophie leaned over her seat. "Hey, Mr. Alvarez, you ever think about retiring?" The bus went quiet. Ray blinked at the road ahead. Retiring? Me? No way. Who else is going to tell you guys these world-class jokes? Can't just leave that responsibility to Marcus. Laughter eased the moment, but inside, Ray felt the weight of the question. Retiring meant stopping, and stopping meant what? Who would they have then? Who would he have? But he pushed the thought aside. It wasn't time for endings yet. The rituals kept growing. Some kids started inventing call and response lines. "Good morning, Mr. A," someone would shout when they boarded. "Good morning, unpaid critics," he'd fire back. Others created inside jokes like the time a student named Jenna left a rubber chicken on his dashboard, and for months afterward, they treated it like the bus mascot. Even teachers started to notice. One day, the principal flagged him down in the parking lot. "Mr. Alvarez, I don't know what you're doing on that bus," she said, half amused, half bewildered, "but I've had 3 different parents tell me their kids look forward to it more than first period. Keep, whatever it is, going." Ray chuckled all the way home. That night, notebook open on his kitchen table, he wrote, Day 120, ritual achieved. Joke Wednesdays. Question Fridays. Rubber chicken mascot. They're not passengers anymore. They're part of the act. He tapped the pen against the page, smiling. What started as him talking into a void had become a chorus. They had given the routine life. They had taken his corny jokes and silly voices and made them their own. And for the first time, Ray realized something important. This wasn't just his show anymore. It was theirs. Chapter 6. Handshakes and Hellos. By the time the leaves turned bronze and red again, and the mornings grew crisp enough for his breath to linger in the air, Mr. Alvarez had noticed something small but remarkable happening. The jokes were still there, his bread and butter, the morning grease to loosen stiff teenage moods, but now, alongside the laughter, something else had begun to sprout. Ritual. Rhythm. A pattern his riders wove around him without anyone ever planning it. It started with one boy in the back, David, a sophomore who wore his baseball cap backward and liked to call everyone Chief. One morning, as he stepped off the bus, he held his fist out sideways. "Give me one, Mr. A." Mr. Alvarez blinked. "One what?" "The knuckles, man. The fist bump. You gotta stay modern." Mr. Alvarez chuckled and obliged, knuckles meeting in a polite little tap. The boy grinned like he'd just handed over a secret password. Next morning, it happened again, and the one after that. And then, well, you give one sophomore an inch of ritual, and by Friday, half the bus wanted in. Suddenly, his mornings were an assembly line of fist bumps, handshakes, goofy variations the kids invented and insisted on teaching him. There was the double tap from Sean, the finger snap finish from Grace, and the elaborate 5-part handshake from Malik that took 2 days of practice before Mr. Alvarez got it right. He would pull the lever to open the door, and the kids would come piling out, palms already raised, fists extended, little sparks of energy he couldn't help but return, and the hellos grew too. "Morning, Mr. A." "Good vibes only, sir." "Don't forget the snap today." "Looking sharp, boss." It made the bus ride into something more than just a commute. He knew it. He could feel it. And the students felt it too. One gray Tuesday, he watched a freshman named Marisol linger in the aisle, clutching her backpack like it was armor. She always sat alone, never joining in the chatter. But when she reached the front, her hand hovered halfway out before she yanked it back like she'd touched something hot. Mr. Alvarez smiled at her. "Was that going to be a handshake, or were you trying to swat a fly?" Her cheeks flamed pink. A couple of kids laughed, not cruelly, just softly, waiting. Marisol hesitated. Then, shyly, she extended her hand. Mr. Alvarez met it, gave a gentle shake, and added a tiny flourish at the end, a silly spin of her wrist. Her smile bloomed like sunlight through cloud, and the next morning she was ready at the door with her hand already out. These little greetings became the heartbeat of his route. He looked forward to them the way other men might look forward to a cup of coffee. They weren't just motions. They were connections. Brief, joyful sparks that built bridges between himself and the dozens of kids who crossed his path each day. And in those quick touches, those bright good mornings, Mr. Alvarez realized something. The bus wasn't just carrying students. It was carrying a community, one handshake, one hello at a time. Chapter 7. Favorite Jokes and Nicknames. By the time winter break was visible on the horizon, Mr. Alvarez had become more than just the driver of Bus 17. He was a running joke himself, a living bit that kept the mornings alive. The kids didn't just board the bus, they boarded the stage, and he, against all expectation, had become the MC. It hadn't started with any master plan. One day, a senior named Logan clambered onto the bus, looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. His hood was up, his backpack hung open, and his face was half buried in his sleeve. Mr. Alvarez, without thinking, leaned down as the boy passed and whispered, "Hey man, you dropped your motivation back at the stop." The bus erupted. Logan groaned, but even he couldn't help the grin tugging at his mouth as he slumped into a seat. And from that one little spark, a wildfire started. Suddenly, every kid wanted to know what line Mr. Alvarez had ready for them in the morning. He became a comedian working the aisle, tossing out one-liners that weren't cruel but quick, sharp enough to draw a laugh, soft enough to leave no sting. "Morning, champ. Did you iron that hoodie, or did the hoodie iron you? Careful with that backpack, kid. If it gets any heavier, I'll have to start charging luggage fees. Nice haircut, Kyle. I almost didn't recognize you without the bird's nest." The students lived for it. They even began throwing things back. One sophomore, Brianna, waved every morning with the same line. "Hey, Mr. A, don't crash today, okay?" And he would always shoot back, "You say that like it's negotiable." Pretty soon, the jokes became ritual, a rhythm of give and take that stitched the mornings together. But it wasn't only the jokes. Nicknames started sprouting like weeds. Mr. Alvarez had always been good with names. It was a skill he took pride in. He knew the attendance sheets, but more importantly, he knew faces, moods, the subtle quirks that made each student stand out. And when he started attaching little nicknames to those quirks, something magical happened. There was Professor, the junior who always carried 3 textbooks and a notebook before the sun was even up. There was Tracksuit, the girl who owned 7 identical zip-up jackets in neon colors. There was DJ, who kept his headphones around his neck and rapped softly into them while staring out the window. And then there were the nicknames the kids gave him in return. At first it was just Mr. A. Then someone stretched it into Big A. Then a freshman, grinning from ear to ear, called him Alvy. The name caught like fire. Soon shouts of "Alvy!" echoed up the steps each morning, a chorus that made him shake his head but smile all the same. He let them call him what they wanted. It wasn't disrespect, it was affection. The kind of affection teenagers only give when they've decided you're one of them. One icy January morning, Malik, the boy with the complicated handshake, stopped at the front of the bus before getting off for school. "Hey, Mr. A, do we ever get to give you a nickname?" "You already did," he said. 3 of them, maybe 4. "No, like a real one, something everyone agrees on." The bus listened. Every seat turned toward him, as if this was a matter of public record. He tapped the wheel, playing along. "All right, but you better make it good. I'm not answering to anything embarrassing." The next day, the verdict was in. They'd written it on the fogged windows, scrawled it in notebooks, whispered it across the aisles. His new name? Captain. It stuck immediately. "Morning, Captain." "Drive us safe, Captain." "You look tired, Captain. Don't steer us into a ditch." At first he rolled his eyes, but the more he heard it, the more he realized how fitting it was. He wasn't just a driver anymore. To them, he was guiding the ship, steady hands on the wheel while they lived their messy teenage lives in the rows behind him. Captain of the bus, captain of the ritual, captain of the laughter. And it wasn't just for the fun. The names and the jokes turned the ride into something warm, something constant. In a world where teenagers stumbled through hallways trying to figure out who they were, the bus became the one place where they could count on being greeted by name, teased in kindness, folded into a running joke that belonged to all of them. Mr. Alvarez felt it, even in the quiet moments, the way the shyest kids started to lift their heads when he spoke, the way the bus, once a box of silence, had become alive with chatter and laughter, the way he, an ordinary man in a cap and uniform, had somehow become the highlight of their mornings. And as he pulled the bus up to the school gates each day, releasing his passengers into the chaos of high school life, he couldn't help but think, maybe this was his calling. Not just driving, not just getting kids from point A to point B, but being the one adult who met them in the in-between spaces, with a laugh, a nickname, a silly line they could carry into the day. "All right, crew," he'd say, as the brakes hissed and the door swung open. "Make me proud out there. Don't forget, your captain's watching." And they always left the bus smiling. Chapter 8. Conversations on the Ride. If the jokes and nicknames were the bright colors painted on Bus 17, the conversations were the brushstrokes that gave it depth. They didn't always make the kids laugh, and sometimes they weren't even funny at all, but they were just as important. For teenagers, the bus was more than a vehicle. It was a pause, a liminal space between the homes they left and the schools they entered. In that pause, Mr. Alvarez discovered, a lot could be said if you gave people the room. It started with little things. One morning, a junior named Cassidy shuffled onto the bus with red eyes. She didn't laugh at his usual, "Hey, somebody stole your smile, check your pockets" routine. She just mumbled hello and slumped into a seat. He could have let it go. He usually did. Sometimes kids just had bad mornings, But as he drove, he caught her reflection in the mirror. She wasn't scrolling her phone or chatting with friends. She was staring out the window, biting her lip. At the stoplight near Jefferson Street, he said softly, "Hey, Cassidy, you all right back there?" The question startled her. Heads turned, but only for a moment. Everyone was used to him calling kids out by name. She blinked at him in the mirror. "I'm fine." He smiled gently. "Fine's a tricky word. Usually means not fine, but I don't want to say. That sound about right?" She gave a weak laugh. "Maybe." He didn't push further, just left it there, let her decide if she wanted to pick it up. By the time the bus pulled into the school lot, she had moved up to the front row. "Thanks, Captain," she said as she got off, "for asking." That was all, but it was the beginning. The next few weeks, more of those little conversations popped up. Marcus, a freshman with a skateboard always clutched under his arm, confessed one morning that he was nervous about trying out for the basketball team. Mr. Alvarez nodded and told him about the first time he parallel parked in front of the DMV examiner. "I nearly took out a mailbox. Didn't stop me from getting the license, though. Point is, nerves don't disqualify you. They just prove you care." Another morning, shy Olivia crept up to the front to ask him if he thought it was weird to like old music. "All my friends think it's dumb that I listen to the Beatles," she said, cheeks pink. Mr. Alvarez leaned down, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Kid, I once played nothing but Elvis on an 8-hour drive from Albuquerque to Denver. My cousin threatened to get out and hitchhike. You're fine." Her smile lit up the whole first row. Over time, the kids began to treat the bus like a rolling confessional. Some mornings, they crowded the aisle just to talk to him before finding seats. Others lingered at the door after school, stalling before stepping out into the world again. They asked him about his favorite movies, whether he believed in aliens, if he thought pineapple belonged on pizza. They argued about music, traded memes, and once spent an entire ride ranking the cafeteria lunches from inedible to actually edible. And while most of it was light, sometimes the conversations dug deeper without meaning to. A sophomore named Jenna admitted one winter afternoon that she felt invisible at school. "I'm not smart enough to be one of the brainiacs, not athletic enough for a team, not cool enough to sit at the tables in the center. I'm just, there." And then Mr. Alvarez glanced at her in the mirror and said, "You know, I've been driving this bus for years, and I noticed something. When people sit in the middle rows, they think they're invisible too. They're not up front with the loud kids, they're not in the back with the rowdy ones. But I see them every morning. You can't sit on my bus without being noticed. You're not invisible here." Jenna didn't say anything, but she held his gaze in the mirror. When she got off, she whispered, "Thanks, Captain." He thought about that one for days afterward. Not all the conversations were heavy. In fact, most were downright silly. But even the silliness mattered. "Captain, if zombies attacked right now, what's your plan?" "Simple. Close the doors, step on the gas, and let them fight it out with the football team in the back row. Sorry, guys, but somebody's got to be the decoys." The whole bus howled, and the football players pretended to protest while secretly loving the attention. Another time, a kid asked him what he'd do if he won the lottery. Without missing a beat, he said, "I'd buy a newer bus, one with cup holders, maybe even a horn that plays La Cucaracha." "Would you quit?" the kid asked. He thought about it, smiling at the road. "Nah, who'd tell you all these terrible jokes in the morning?" It became a tradition, at least one what-if question per ride. Sometimes they were absurd, sometimes serious. Sometimes he answered like a comedian, sometimes like a teacher, and every time the bus leaned in, hanging on his words. By spring, it was impossible to deny that Bus 17 had become something special. Students from other buses whispered about the captain and his running commentary. Kids who graduated would text younger siblings. "Does he still do the jokes? Has he made you a nickname yet?" But for the kids riding in the moment, it wasn't about tradition or reputation. It was about how they felt when the yellow doors swung open and they stepped inside. They felt seen, heard, safe. On the last day before summer break, as he parked in front of the school, a chorus rose from the back. "Thanks for the rides, Captain." He waved them off, as always, but when the bus finally emptied and silence filled the aisle, he sat for a moment longer than usual. He looked at the rows of seats, each one carrying echoes of 1,000 conversations, and felt a warmth in his chest that no paycheck could ever buy. This was the work, not the wheel, not the schedule, not the routes, the conversations, the laughter, the small ordinary moments that somehow turned extraordinary. He turned the key and the bus fell quiet, but inside him the voices of his kids lingered, a symphony of chatter and trust. The captain would be back next year, and so would they. Chapter 9. Generations of Laughter. Time on a school bus isn't measured the same way it is anywhere else. The rides are short, the years long, and yet before you know it, the faces change. Seniors graduate, freshmen climb aboard, and the captain, steady at the wheel, remains the same, greeting each new wave as though they'd been there all along. By the time Mr. Alvarez had been driving Bus 17 for close to a decade, he had ferried hundreds of students to and from school. But to him, they weren't just numbers. Each year brought a new rhythm, a new cast of characters, and yet the tradition stayed alive. The jokes, the nicknames, the conversations, generations of laughter passed from one busload of kids to the next. The first big reminder of how long he'd been at this came when a familiar face popped back onto his bus one chilly November afternoon. "Captain!" a voice called, and he looked up to see a tall young man grinning at him, no longer in uniform, but carrying a messenger bag instead of a backpack. It was Logan, the boy he'd once teased for dropping his motivation at the bus stop. "Logan? You're what, in college now?" "Community, yeah," Logan said, climbing aboard for a visit. "My little brother's riding now. Thought I'd surprise him." The bus cheered as Logan slapped hands with kids he barely knew, his younger brother sinking in embarrassment. But what caught Mr. Alvarez off guard wasn't Logan's return. It was what he said before leaving. "Hey, Captain, you still making kids laugh every morning?" Mr. Alvarez chuckled. "Trying my best." Logan grinned. "Good. Keep it going. It helps more than you think." And then he was gone, off to campus, but the words stayed. It wasn't the last time. Every so often, former riders would reappear, picking up siblings, visiting teachers, just passing through town. They'd peek onto the bus and grin like they were stepping back into childhood. Still calling him Captain? Does he still do the "don't forget your homework" bit? Man, I miss this bus. To the kids still riding, it was like hearing legends from alumni, proof that what they were experiencing wasn't just a one-year quirk, but part of something bigger, something that lasted. Mr. Alvarez noticed it too. The jokes evolved, different punchlines for different years. The nicknames rotated, new ones replacing old. But the ritual itself? That stayed constant. Each generation picked it up like a baton and carried it forward. By his 7th year, he'd developed something close to a routine, not by planning, but by instinct. Freshmen were always nervous, so he'd go easier on them. Light jokes, silly nicknames that built them up instead of knocking them down. Sophomores started opening up more, eager to prove themselves. Juniors? He teased them mercilessly about studying for SATs, about learning to drive, about thinking they're grown. Seniors, though, they got the heart-to-hearts. That was when the conversations grew deeper, when kids started asking him about life beyond the bus. "Captain, what was your first job?" "Captain, did you ever get scared about the future?" "Captain, what do you regret?" He didn't always have the perfect answers, but he always answered honestly. And by the time those seniors got off for the last time, there was always a moment. A handshake, a fist bump, sometimes even a hug. "Thanks for the rides. Thanks for the laughs. Thanks for noticing me." He carried those words with him more than they knew. There was one morning that brought it all into focus. It was the last day of school for the graduating class. Seniors were decked out in their class of shirts, blasting music on portable speakers, tossing notes across the aisle. The air buzzed with anticipation. When the bus pulled up to the school, the seniors lingered. One by one, instead of rushing off, they stopped at the front. "Thanks, Captain." "Love you, Captain." "You're the best part of high school, man." It kept going until every last one had stepped off. And then, as he pulled the bus away, he noticed the freshmen staring wide-eyed. One whispered to another, "Why'd they all thank him like that?" The other shrugged. "I don't know. Guess it's just what you do." And just like that, the ritual carried forward. The next generation had seen what it meant and would repeat it when their turn came. The traditions grew richer as the years piled on. There was the annual first snow joke, where the first day flakes appeared, the captain would make the same corny pun. "Well, looks like the sky forgot its dandruff shampoo." The kids groaned, but by February they were begging him to say it again. There was the farewell song, a goofy, made-up jingle the seniors sang on their last ride. "Captain, oh Captain, thanks for the trip. You made our mornings not feel so bleep." The last word changed every year, depending on who suggested the rhyme. And of course, there were the nicknames, some of which lasted well beyond graduation. A student named Taylor told him years later at the grocery store, "People still call me DJ 'cause of you." What struck Mr. Alvarez most was how the bus became a thread running through lives, tying them together. Students who wouldn't otherwise have spoken to each other bonded over his jokes. Quiet kids found their voices. Loud kids learned to listen. And for him, the years blurred not into monotony, but into a mosaic. He could still picture the first class he drove, still hear Logan's laugh, still see the embarrassed grin of Malik when he fumbled their handshake. At the same time, he was already storing up the memories of the new crew. Cassidy with her shy smiles, Marcus with his skateboard, Olivia with her Beatles obsession. Generations, overlapping like ripples in a pond. One evening, after dropping off his last student, Mr. Alvarez parked the bus and just sat there. The seats were empty, but in his mind, they were full. Past, present, and future riders all crowding in, chattering, laughing, calling him Captain. He realized then that what he'd built wasn't just a routine, it was legacy. Not the kind of legacy written in history books, but one etched into the hearts of hundreds of teenagers. 1,000 small moments of laughter, encouragement, belonging. Generations of laughter, carried on wheels. And as he turned off the engine, he thought, if this is all I ever do, it's enough. Chapter 10. The End of the Route. The mornings felt different now. Not because of the sunrise. It still painted the rooftops gold in that stubborn way that always made Mr. J squint into his windshield, like the sun had a personal vendetta against bus drivers. But because of the way the kids greeted him, there was weight behind it now. Every "Hey, Mr. J" and every silly pun shouted from the aisle carried something unspoken, like the kids knew time was moving faster than the bus itself. Mr. J could feel it too. He wasn't young anymore. His knees made more noise than the brakes did, and sometimes when he leaned down to check the tires in the mornings, he stayed crouched a little longer than he meant to, just to give his back a chance to catch up with the rest of him. But what hadn't changed, not in all these years, was the laughter. "Hey, Mr. J," called out Sarah, a senior with a glittering backpack covered in enamel pins. "Why don't eggs tell each other secrets?" Mr. J adjusted the mirror, raised an eyebrow. "I don't know. Why?" "Because they might crack up." The bus erupted in groans and chuckles. Mr. J gave her a big, mock-serious nod. "That's solid, Sarah. I'll be stealing that one." "You always say that," another student piped up. "And I always mean it," Mr. J replied, grinning. And over the years, the routines had woven themselves so tightly into the rides that the bus practically ran on them. He didn't just drive them to school, he carried their mornings, their after-school weariness, their private jokes, their pre-exam nerves. Freshmen sat quiet at first, unsure, but by junior year, they were usually tossing in puns of their own, or challenging Mr. J to top whatever bad dad joke they'd cooked up. Some kids practiced stand-up routines right there in the aisle. Others leaned in to share pieces of their day. A new puppy, a family move, a college acceptance letter. The bus had become a stage, a therapy couch, and a clubhouse all at once. And now, as the final weeks of the school year wound down, Mr. J started noticing the looks, lingering ones, seniors glancing at him like they were trying to memorize the curve of his grin, or the exact way he held the wheel when he told a joke mid-turn. It made his chest ache in a good way. One Thursday afternoon, while the bus idled outside the school, Rosa, a junior with braids swinging down her shoulders, climbed up the steps slowly, holding something behind her back. "Careful," Mr. J said, narrowing his eyes in mock suspicion. "That looks like contraband." "It's, She hesitated, then revealed a cake box. Inside was a slightly lopsided chocolate cake with the words, "Thanks for the laughs," written in uneven frosting. Mr. J blinked. "Rosa, is this your subtle way of telling me I need to eat more vegetables?" The bus burst out laughing. Rosa blushed but smiled. "It's just, we wanted to say thanks, for all of it." He sat there for a moment, throat tight, before managing, "Well, thank you. But I can't eat this whole cake by myself. I'll need about 40 forks." Which of course turned into a chaotic, frosting-smeared mess of a bus ride, but Mr. J wouldn't have traded it for anything. Word started spreading that Mr. J might be nearing retirement. He hadn't said the words out loud, but the kids picked up hints. The sighs when he lowered himself into the driver's seat, the way he sometimes stared at the rows of seats a beat longer, like committing them to memory. One morning, Tyler, a senior who had once been a quiet freshman sitting in the very back, lingered as the others got off. You're not gonna quit, are you?" he asked. Mr. J tilted his head. "Someday, Tyler. Not today. Not tomorrow. But buses don't run forever, Engines wear down. Drivers too." Tyler chewed his lip. If you ever do, I hope you know this won't be the same without you." For once, Mr. J didn't have a joke. He just patted Tyler's shoulder. "Thanks, kid. That means more than you know." As the last week of school approached, the atmosphere on the bus thickened. Not with dread, but with the kind of sentimental weight teenagers rarely showed anywhere else. On Main Setri, someone had made a playlist called Mr. J's Greatest Hits, full of songs they'd heard him hum at stoplights. The kids started chanting, "Jokes, jokes, jokes," before every departure, demanding a fresh one-liner to kick off the road. And every single ride home, without fail, someone whispered, "What happens next year?" Mr. J tried not to hear it, tried to keep things light, to end each day with laughter. But when he parked the bus in the depot at night, he sat in the empty seats for a while, running a hand along the vinyl backs, thinking of all the kids who had grown up here, who had carried pieces of him into their own lives. The route might be ending, but the jokes, maybe those could keep rolling. The final Friday arrived. Graduation gowns rustled as seniors climbed aboard one last time, tassels swinging, eyes red from emotions they'd never admit out loud. "Mr. J," Sarah said softly, "tell us one more." He looked at them, all of them, from the teary-eyed seniors to the wide-eyed freshmen, and he gave them the biggest grin his tired face could manage. "All right," he said, "why don't scientists trust atoms?" A chorus answered almost in unison, "Because they make up everything." The bus shook with laughter. And in that roar of joy, in that explosion of connection, Mr. J felt it deep in his bones. This wasn't the end of his road. Not really. It was just a stop along the way. Chapter 11. A secret plan. The conspiracy began small. Like most great teenage plots, it started with a whisper too loud for the cafeteria's echoing acoustics. Tyler had been the first to say it. He was a senior, broad-shouldered now, but still remembered being the nervous freshman who had sat in the very back and prayed the ride would end quickly. Mr. J had changed that. Joke by joke, handshake by handshake, Tyler had found himself laughing before first period even began. He'd grown up on that bus. And now, as the final weeks of high school ticked away, Tyler wasn't ready to just say goodbye. "We've got to do something," he told Sarah and Rosa one Tuesday, pushing aside his untouched tray of pizza. "I mean, more than a card, more than a group photo, something bigger. He's given us years of laughter. We owe him something back." Sarah leaned forward, twirling a piece of spaghetti around her fork. "Like what? A giant banner that says, 'World's funniest bus driver'? Better. Tyler said, lowering his voice. Something that puts him where he belongs, on a stage. Rosa raised her brows. You mean, like, an actual performance? Tyler nodded. A real one, the kind where he's not just cracking jokes while dodging potholes, but in front of an audience that can actually clap without worrying about falling out of their seats. Sarah's grin spread slow and sure. You know, I don't hate this idea. That tiny spark caught fire faster than any of them expected. By Wednesday morning, kids were passing notes up and down the bus aisles, not about math homework or who was dating who, but about how to pull off something enormous. A scribble on one sheet read, fundraiser, another, talent show, like America's Got Talent, another, social media. He'd blow up online. By Thursday afternoon, when the bus pulled out of the school lot, the energy was electric. The seniors had clustered near the front, whispering and giggling in a way that made the freshmen wide-eyed with curiosity. Sarah couldn't help herself. She stood dramatically in the aisle, raising her arm like she was commanding a battalion. "People of Bus 47, she announced in a theatrical voice, we are going to get Mr. J on a stage, a real one. No more excuses, no more pothole punchlines. We are taking this man to glory." The bus erupted in applause and cheers. Mr. J, of course, glanced in the mirror with mock suspicion. "What's all that about? If you're plotting mutiny, I get half the snacks." The kids howled, but not one of them gave the plan away. Not yet. Part 1. Raising the money. The first problem was simple. Entering a competition big enough to matter wasn't free. Neither was renting a tuxedo, printing flyers, or even gas money to get him there. Teenagers weren't exactly flush with cash, so they had to get creative. The bake sale came first. Rosa's grandma baked 20 pans of brownies. Sarah brought in cookies so sweet they could put a dentist's kid through college. Tyler showed up with cupcakes that looked like they'd been frosted during a minor earthquake, but nobody cared. People bought them all. Then came the lemonade stand. It felt ridiculous, seniors in their caps and gowns pouring Dixie cups of lemonade for passing joggers. But the sign sold it. "Help send our bus driver to the stage." Each cup had a sticky note joke written on it. "What do you call fake spaghetti? An impasta." Parallel lines have so much in common. Too bad they'll never meet. Joggers laughed, bought seconds, and stuffed extra dollar bills into the jar. By the weekend, they'd raised nearly $200. Not enough for the full dream, but more than any of them had expected. And more importantly, people were starting to ask questions. "What's this for?" one parent asked, sipping her lemonade. "For Mr. J," Sarah said simply. "He deserves a real audience." The mom's eyes softened. "I rode his bus when I was in high school. He hasn't changed a bit." She slipped a 20 into the jar. "Make sure he gets there." Part 2. Going viral. The second part of the plan came almost by accident. Sarah had filmed Mr. J one morning as he eased the bus around a corner, narrating the traffic like he was David Attenborough. And here we see the majestic high school sophomore sprinting desperately across the street, clutching a Pop-Tart like it's the last one on Earth. The bus roared with laughter. Sarah posted the clip to TikTok with the caption, "Our bus driver deserves his own Netflix special. Tell me I'm wrong." By the end of the day, it had 30,000 views. By Friday, 200,000. Comments poured in from strangers across the country. "Protect Mr. J at all costs." "Where do I buy tickets?" "This is more entertaining than late-night TV." Other kids followed suit. Tyler posted a clip of Mr. J rapping the names during roll call. Rosa uploaded a shaky video of him telling a knock-knock joke while perfectly parallel parking. Freshmen who had barely spoken all year were suddenly uploading their own Mr. J moments. Within 2 weeks, Mr. J was trending. The students didn't just have a plan. They had an army of online supporters cheering them on. Part 3. Keeping the secret. This, however, was the hardest part. Mr. J wasn't oblivious. He noticed when the bus went suspiciously quiet mid-conversation as he glanced in the mirror. He noticed the coughs that always followed when someone nearly slipped. He even noticed when Tyler tried to hide his phone screen, only to flash a very obvious thumbnail of Mr. J himself, eating a donut with exaggerated drama. "Tyler," Mr. J said one afternoon, raising an eyebrow, "was that me with a donut?" Tyler stammered. No. It was a donut tutorial, very educational. On donuts." "Educational, huh?" Mr. J said, deadpan. "Good, because you'll all be tested on it Friday. Multiple choice, jelly-filled or cream-filled." The bus exploded with laughter. But as soon as his eyes went back to the road, Tyler mouthed, "Close call" to the others. Rosa even instituted code words. "If he gets suspicious," she whispered to the freshman, "say you're studying for bio. He'll never question that." The big discovery. Everything clicked into place when Rosa slammed a flyer onto the cafeteria table one Friday. Her eyes sparkled with triumph. "The Regional Talent Showcase," she said. "Entry deadline in 2 weeks. Prize money, stage lights, a full live stream. This is it." Sarah gasped. Tyler nearly dropped his soda. "You're serious?" "As serious as a pop quiz," Rosa grinned. "We enter him, we pay the fee, we get him on that stage. And guess what? If we pull this off, we can pack the audience with everyone who's ever been on his bus." It was perfect. Almost too perfect. Now all that stood between them and success was keeping it under wraps until the big reveal. Close calls. Of course, secrets this big had a way of wobbling on their foundations. Like the time a freshman blurted out, "Wait until the showcase," loud enough for Mr. J to cock his head. "Showcase," he repeated. The kid froze. "Showcase of math homework. Yeah, we're showcasing our math homework next week." Mr. J squinted, then let out a belly laugh. "If you're showcasing math homework, I want front row seats." Or the time Tyler left the fundraiser jar in plain sight near the bus steps. Mr. J read the words, "Send Mr. J to the stage," before anyone could snatch it away. He tapped the lid thoughtfully. "You kids trying to get rid of me?" "No," Sarah squeaked. "We're just, practicing our handwriting." "On a jar?" "Yeah, very round letters." Mr. J didn't push, but the twinkle in his eye said he knew more than he let on. The bond. The longer the plan stretched, the tighter the group became. Seniors and freshmen shared tasks. Athletes, theater kids, and honor roll students who never normally crossed paths were now united under one mission: to give back to the man who had given them laughter every morning and afternoon. It wasn't just about the showcase anymore. It was about telling Mr. J that he mattered in the biggest way they could. By the time the deadline hit, the entry fee was paid, the forms were submitted, and the plan was airtight. All they had left to do was keep it quiet until the night of the big reveal. And somehow, against all odds, they managed it. Mr. J, blissfully unaware, kept the jokes rolling, kept the kids smiling, never realizing that the biggest laugh of his life was waiting just around the corner. Chapter 12. The Big Stage. The auditorium smelled like polished wood, popcorn, and something faintly floral that someone had sprayed on purpose. Mr. J had been told only that the school had arranged a special recognition ceremony for a community member. The students had been careful to keep the real plan under wraps, crafting a cover story about awards and plaques. He shuffled up the aisle, a little slower than usual, his hands tucked into his pockets. The stage loomed ahead, enormous and dazzling, lights hanging above like stars just for him. Curtains of deep crimson velvet framed it, their folds swallowing the edges of the polished wood. "Good grief," Mr. J muttered under his breath, adjusting his tie, an impromptu attempt at looking formal. "This is bigger than I thought." The audience was seated in perfect rows, a patchwork of familiar faces and strangers alike. Parents, teachers, and students, some current, some long graduated, filled every seat. Signs decorated the balconies and walls. "We love you, Mr. J, and the funniest bus driver in the universe," were written in glittering letters, some carefully printed, some painstakingly hand-painted. As he stepped onto the stage, the floorboards creaked under his weight, echoing in the cavernous hall. For a heartbeat, he froze, the bright stage lights illuminating the slight tremble in his hands. Then he saw them. The kids. Every grade, every year he had driven, smiling up at him, waving, holding homemade signs, some with little jokes scribbled along the edges. "Wow," he whispered. A hush fell over the audience as the students cued the lights. Tyler, Sarah, and Rosa were up front, grinning like co-conspirators who had just pulled off the most elaborate prank of all time. "You're all of you?" Mr. J asked, voice cracking just slightly. Rosa nodded, eyes bright. "We're here because of you, because you've spent years making us laugh, making us feel seen. Now it's our turn." The students broke into applause. The crowd followed, cheers and whistles echoing like a wave of warmth through the hall. Mr. J's throat tightened. He swallowed. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He laughed. The first joke came naturally, almost reflexively. "So," he said, gripping the microphone, "I heard there was a school bus that wanted to see me on stage, and here I am. Hi, everyone." A ripple of laughter, followed by clapping, rolled through the auditorium. He paused, scanning the audience, landing on the familiar faces from the bus. "I've spent years trying to make mornings better, because nothing says good morning like a dozen teenagers crammed into a moving metal box." Another laugh. One of the alumni yelled, "Best commute ever." Mr. J grinned. "Exactly. And you've been my co-pilots, my critics, my occasional sugar smugglers. I owe you more than I can count." The students on stage behind him held up little cue cards. Inside jokes, funny one-liners, reminders of the jokes he had perfected over the years. They were all part of the plan, the show, the surprise. Then came the montage. The lights dimmed and a projector flickered to life. Clips played of him on the bus over the years, narrating traffic jams like epic adventures, handing out bad puns with the precision of a seasoned comedian, performing for kids who didn't know yet that this bus was going to become their favorite place on earth. Some of the kids on stage had taken turns voicing his lines, mimicking his timing, his dramatic pauses. The audience laughed, clapped, and sometimes murmured fondly. Former students leaned toward each other, whispering, "I remember that one." Mr. J's eyes glistened. One by one, he saw faces he hadn't seen in years, kids who had moved on but had carried pieces of him with them. They were here, back in his world for a night. And he realized, somewhere deep down, that the world he had created on a humble school bus had touched more lives than he'd ever imagined. When the montage ended, the lights snapped back on, and Mr. J held the microphone with a steadier hand. "All right," he said, a smile stretching across his face. "You want jokes? You've got jokes. But remember, some of these are top-secret bus material, okay?" He delivered one pun after another, each one a perfectly timed punchline he'd honed over years. The audience laughed, genuinely, some leaning forward, clutching their stomachs, wiping tears from their eyes. And every time he glanced at the students on stage with him, he saw nods, shared smiles, little winks that said, "We did this together." Midway through his set, the students had a surprise of their own. They brought out a giant cake, chocolate with bright frosting letters. "Thanks, Mr. J." He froze for a moment. You didn't have to." "Oh, we did," Tyler said, grinning from ear to ear. "You've been feeding us laughter for years. Now it's our turn." Rosa added, "And don't worry, we made sure it's not just edible. It's Instagram-worthy." The audience erupted into laughter and applause. Mr. J shook his head, chuckling, and for the first time in decades, he felt completely, unreservedly celebrated. The night stretched on. Mr. J performed bit after bit, interspersed with little interludes of shared jokes with the students. Sometimes he would hand the microphone to them, letting them deliver lines he had taught them in secret on the bus, and the audience would roar. It was a tapestry of years, laughter woven together from every morning and afternoon spent together. Backstage, he caught glimpses of the alumni smiling, some wiping tears. Teachers who had watched him silently support kids for years were nodding with approval, and the current students? Their pride shone brighter than the stage lights. "See?" he whispered to no one in particular. "We did it." And they had. As the final joke landed and the applause roared louder than he thought possible, Mr. J looked out at the crowd, feeling the weight and warmth of years compressed into one moment. He had dreamed of helping students, of brightening their days, of sharing small joys on a yellow bus. And now, here they were, paying him back in a way he could have never imagined. A banner unfurled behind him. "Bus 47 forever. Thanks for the memories." He swallowed, chest tight, eyes glistening. I don't know what to say. Sarah, Rosa, and Tyler stepped forward. You don't have to, Sarah said. You've already said it. Every day, every joke, every ride. We just wanted to remind you how much it meant. He laughed, shaky but full of life. Well, then I guess the only thing left is one final joke, the audience chorused. Exactly. One last ride, he said. The lights dimmed just a bit more, the crowd leaning in, the laughter and applause swelling as he delivered a perfectly timed, hilarious, heart-filled punchline that bridged years of shared mornings and afternoons. And in that moment, Mr. J knew, without doubt, that the journey wasn't over. Not really. It had just reached its happiest stop yet. Chapter 13, Full Circle. The morning after the showcase, the school bus seemed quieter. Not because it was empty. Oh no. The freshmen still chattered in the aisles, and a few seniors were still lingering for last-minute jokes, but because the weight of something significant hung in the air. Mr. J climbed into the driver's seat, the familiar squeak of the door hinge greeting him like an old friend. He inhaled that unique bus scent, vinyl seats, the faint tang of gasoline, a hint of the hand sanitizer the school insisted on. He thought, not for the first time, how much this little moving box of metal had carried. Not just students, not just books, but years of laughter, stories, and memories. The bus engine purred to life. The kids piled aboard, some more subdued than usual. Even freshmen, who had only ever known the bus in its current golden era of humor and camaraderie, seemed aware that something had shifted. This wasn't just any Friday. This was a day of quiet reflection, a pause between the past and the future. Oh, why? Good morning, Bus 47, Mr. J called, voice full of his usual energy, all aboard for the ride that could very well be the best one yet. And there were giggles, a few groans, the usual chorus of complaints about tardiness, but underneath it all, an undercurrent of affection ran like electricity through the aisle. He adjusted the mirror and smiled at their reflections, thinking about how much they had grown, not just physically, but in confidence, in joy, in camaraderie. Every year, they carried a piece of him along with them, just as he carried them, safe and entertained, from stop to stop. The tradition had blossomed further than he could have imagined. He noticed it in the subtle things. A freshman humming one of his old bus jingles. Tyler, teaching a younger kid the secret handshake that had started 5 years ago. Posters on the walls of lockers referencing jokes only true veterans of Bus 47 would understand. The bus was no longer merely a vehicle. It was a vessel of shared history, an archive of laughter, a tangible link between generations of students who had all, in their way, shaped the man behind the wheel. By the last stop, Mr. J's heart was full, and he noticed something extraordinary. A few older faces waiting. Alumni from years past had come back, not because of an official reunion, but because the news of the showcase, the cake, the social media clips, and the stories of his morning routines had spread. They stood at the curb, waving and smiling, many holding coffee cups or travel mugs, just like they had once carried Pop-Tarts and backpacks onto his bus. Mr. J, Tyler called, running up from the front of the line. You got an audience today? Mr. J laughed. I see that. It seems the years have made this route a little more crowded than I expected. Sarah waved from the sidewalk. We couldn't let it go without saying goodbye or thank you. Properly. Rosa added, You've given us mornings to look forward to, Mr. J, and you've made the end of school something special too. You deserve this. The bus doors closed, and Mr. J shifted into gear. As they rolled down the familiar streets, he started telling jokes, bad ones, good ones, and some so terrible they looped back into brilliance. Every punchline elicited groans and laughter, as it always had. But now, the audience wasn't just the students currently on the bus. It was every memory, every laugh, every alumnus who had ever ridden these aisles, and every story that had been shared along the way. He made it a ritual that day to pull every little trick he had perfected. The dramatic pause at stop signs, the mock commentary on the squirrels crossing the road, the fake outrage when someone dropped a pen. The kids responded in kind. Secret handshakes. Inside jokes shouted over the hum of the engine. Impromptu impressions of each other. It was a symphony of connection, the kind that only grows richer with time, where each note resonates with all the ones that came before. By the time the bus pulled into the depot for the last time that week, a sense of quiet contentment had settled over everyone. Mr. J shut off the engine and leaned back in his seat, smiling through a faint sheen of tears. He thought about the students who had grown into young adults, the alumni who had returned, the small victories along the way. Jokes remembered, smiles shared, a safe space for mornings and afternoons. He realized something important. He hadn't just been driving a bus. He had been carrying hope, laughter, and connection. And it had all come back to him, multiplied, through the kindness and effort of the very kids he had spent years lifting up. The epilogue. Conversations across years. Later that afternoon, after the bus had been parked and the students gone, a few lingered. Tyler, Sarah, Rosa, and 2 alumni from previous years approached, carrying coffee cups, notebooks, and a few lingering jokes they couldn't resist sharing. "Mind if we hang out for a bit?" Sarah asked. Mr. J chuckled. "After everything today, you're welcome to camp out here until sunset." They settled into the familiar seats, swapping stories across the years. Alumni remembered their favorite jokes. Freshmen shared their admiration for the bus rituals they had just begun to understand. The conversation bounced like a basketball on a gym floor. Laughter, groans, teasing, heartfelt gratitude. Tyler leaned forward. "You know, I was thinking, when we were planning all of this, we weren't just trying to surprise you. We were trying to show you how much it matters." "It does," Mr. J said, nodding slowly. "I think I've been taking it for granted all those mornings. But seeing you all today, seeing everyone who came back, I understand now." Rosa tilted her head, smiling. "We grew up on your jokes. We didn't even realize it at the time." "Neither did I," he admitted. "I thought I was just helping them get to school. But really, you've helped me too. You've given me a tradition I'll never forget. One I hope someone else will carry forward." The alumni exchanged glances. One of them, now a college student, said softly, "We already have. Every joke, every handshake, every little thing you did. They live on in all of us." Mr. J's grin was slow, wide, and genuine. He leaned back, stretching his arms along the back of the seats. "Well," he said, voice soft but full of life, "then I guess the ride isn't over. It just keeps going, through all of you." And in that moment, with laughter echoing around the empty bus, he knew it was true. The route might have an official end, but the joy, the jokes, the friendships, the tradition, it would roll on forever. The bus driver had started with small jokes for sleepy students on early mornings. Now, he had an audience that spanned years, a legacy built on laughter, kindness, and connection. The final stop on Bus 47 was just another beginning, and somewhere, in quiet smiles and shared memories, everyone who had ever ridden that bus would carry a piece of Mr. J forward, just as he had carried them.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, stay safe.